Great to be here. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. We have a very important session. It's the last one on the stage. We're talking about money and saving the world. And I am very excited to have you two here. Was that? All good. And with this fire, it's like in the old times. We'll share some stories, try to define what impact investing actually means. Can you tell us a bit about what it means to you, what it means in your current work, for example?
Sure. So my name is Seth Bannon. I'm a founding partner at a seed fund called 50 Years, based in Silicon Valley. And as was mentioned, we invest in entrepreneurs that want to build massive businesses and want to build them in a way that uses technology to solve some of the world's biggest problems. We have a sort of very precise definition of what we mean by impact. So we look for entrepreneurs that, if successful, will both have massive capital returns, but also make a dent in one of the Sustainable Development Goals put out by the UN.
Is saving polar bears one of your kind of focus areas?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Michael.
So, hey guys, I'm Michael. I'm a partner at 8 Roads, a venture capital firm in our London office. I think we essentially try to back technology entrepreneurs who we think are going to be capable of defining categories with their products and businesses. And so I think to us, that is very much the impact that we have in mind. I think I'd like to think of ourselves as an impactful investor that I think is part of the discussion here.
Okay. Yesterday we were talking to Steve Jurvetson in the speaker studio, and he's also known as a very kind of impact-driven investor, but they're not focused on solely the impact. So we have kind of different variations of companies. Some of them, like you, focus on impact. Some do it anyway and kind of measure it differently. So how do you measure impact? Do you have some kind of systems to do it?
So it's a good question, and I think you touched upon a really important point, which is that impact means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so the word itself has almost lost all meaning. There's some people, when they hear impact investing, they think, oh, this is charity. I'm just going to sort of give my money away for a good cause. And then on the other side, you have a lot of startups that describe what they do as impact when they're helping people get a sushi delivery with a push of a button. And it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around that. And so it's true that there's many different ways that you can sort of add value to the world. There's a sort of large spectrum. In our eyes, on the very edge of the spectrum, you have businesses maybe that have dedicated themselves to running themselves ethically. They say, we're not going to cause any environmental damage. We're going to treat our employees well, and we're going to treat our customers well. This is like an ethical company, and maybe they're on the spectrum of impact. We, in particular, are excited about the companies whose business models are directly tied into solving some of the world's biggest problems. So, diagnosing disease, educating everyone, feeding the world. These are the things that sort of really excite us.
Great.
I think, as you said, it's the question where on the scale of impact to being ethical, which is table stakes, and clearly nobody wants to cross that line. But I think there's a spectrum. I think what we talk about with companies is we want to understand what their mission is, and we want to be excited about it. We want to be to feel that they're excited about it and passionate. Some of it is a bit selfish if you think of what it takes about building up a company. You need to convince others to join you. You need to win over customers. And so if your mission does not resonate with a potential employee, they're probably not going to join, or they might not be the type of employee that you want. So I think it's important to have a very clearly defined mission that is broad and impactful enough, to generate excitement, right? And then it's important to, set out big picture KPIs about what does winning or achieving that mission mean for us, and then keep revisiting them and keep yourself honest outside of financial constraints of how are we doing with regards to the goal we set ourselves in the beginning.
And you might have noticed I sort of sidestepped your question, but I will call myself out for having done that. So measuring impact is incredibly difficult, and the entire world of people who care about sort of doing good have been struggling with this for a decade. And no one, even at the sort of later stages, have exactly figured out what the best tactics are there. We, in particular, are seed investors, and at the early stages of a company, it can be hard to measure the financial health of how they're doing really accurately, because we're investing at the stage where they're still sort of figuring out product market fit, and so to try and measure the impact they're having at that stage is nearly impossible. So we look at the motivations of the founder. We say our founders are these people who really have a burning desire to solve these big problems. We look at their business model and how tied in that is to them actually having the sort of impact that excites us. And then we go with it, and we sort of hope that they'll execute the way that they want to. But there's no stringent measuring on our part.
Yeah. What I love about this area of companies is that there are some really crazy things. Some are really sci-fi, some are really out there, and we can't necessarily see their results right away because the technology is not ready yet, or it's a long way. So how do you kind of define what's too crazy, what's like crazy enough to be good or profitable? Do you have some some way to define?
It's really difficult. It's some combination of intense diligence and intuition. But oftentimes the best investments are the ones that are right on the edge, where you say, maybe this is totally workable and they can do this in the next 5 years, but maybe this is 20 years away. Right? And in areas where experts disagree, so one of our investments is a company called Memphis Meats, which spoke on the stage and on the founder stage earlier. They're culturing meat to eat. So they're basically replicating the biological processes that happen inside of a cow, outside of a cow, so people can eat sustainable.
That's why I draw the crazy line right there.
So that people can eat sustainable, clean meat. And we went to the Cultured Meat Symposium in Maastricht, where all the scientists got together in the field, and we asked all the scientists, how far away is this before this is on people's plates? And some said 2 years, and some said 20 years. Right? And so it's clearly the type of investment where there's a chance, it's just too early. But if they hit the timing right, it's going to be an absolute blockbuster. And so we sort of like to live on that line.
On the edge.
My answer is not going to be that exciting. So we specifically dodged that question a little bit by investing slightly later stage. So the companies that we ultimately partner with might have had the craziest idea ever. From some people's perspective, by the time we work with them, they typically have found product market fit, meaning that they've identified a target audience for whom they're solving a problem with their product. And so by that point, sort of the judgment of what's crazy or not, we can leave that up to the data and sort of say if people, that's how they consume meat, who am I to judge what's crazy or not, right? That's ultimately not, not for me to decide on.
So it's a different kind of problem for you. You're trying to see which one has the growth potential from there on.
Ultimately, look, the way we think about this is a company goes through stages, right? You first need to build a product that's incredibly difficult. Then you need to find product market fit. You need to identify, who is this product for, and oftentimes you'll see that what you had in mind when you were building the product turns out to be completely different, right? And at that point you have, hopefully a great team and a great product, and now the journey begins to having a very successful company, right? And that can be expressed in financial metrics. That can be the impact that you have on the people, but all of a sudden it has to grow significantly in scale, and that's the stage that where we are coming in and trying to help entrepreneurs to build a business.
Are there? I think there are some very exciting companies, investments that you've had recently. What are you kind of following particularly closely?
I'm super excited about all 21 of our portfolio companies. I think they're all doing really important, incredible work. but I'll just go with the sort of most recent ones. We just invested in a company that is enzymatically making hydrogen peroxide. So the current method of production is a 200-step process. Each step in the process requires its own building. So a hydrogen peroxide production plant is 15 football fields big. It produces a massive amount of CO2. It's incredibly toxic. They often explode. Late last year, some people died in one of these explosions. And this company figured out a 2-step process. Their machine is about the size of this fireplace, and they make completely clean, safe hydrogen peroxide. And so these are the sort of things that really excite us. Like, they're going to completely turn that industry on its head.
Great.
I'll go with one from the Nordics called Universal Avenue from Sweden. So that's a fascinating company that is helping redefine what we call the future of work. So, which is what I think is an interesting topic, sort of, you know, you look at the Ubers and Airbnbs and sort of this fixed labor market, and going 9 to 5 to the office is being redefined, and you have more and more options. And so, you know, we're trying to think about how that's going to change in the future. And so what Universal Avenue does is that they enable businesses to, you know, really connect with small local businesses by you know, essentially creating a marketplace for freelancers that are able to represent their products, which, you know, essentially creates this win-win-win situation, and then as part of it allows people to be much more flexible in the way they work and how they prioritize their time, which is, I think, pretty fascinating and has a whole host of opportunities and issues with it.
Yeah, for sure. Seth, you were just, in your talk today, you were talking about millennials and how they see work differently. They want certain meaning from their work. Do you think this is driving the change towards more impactful companies?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think there have been, you know, quite a large number of sort of revolutions in the business world in the past 50 years. You had, you know, the movement to the PC, spawned companies like Microsoft. You had the movement to mobile, which made companies like Apple the most valuable on earth. You know, you had movements to the cloud, which allowed companies like Netflix to flourish. And, you know, we really see a new trend forming, which is this movement from purely profit-driven business to impact plus profit. And as you mentioned, it's largely driven by millennials. They just see business differently than every other generation that's preceded them. There was a study done where millennials were asked open-ended, what is the purpose of business? And 47%, which was a plurality, said some version of to improve society or protect the environment. Deloitte did a study of 7,700 millennials across 29 countries, and 89% of them said that the health of a business should be judged not purely in financial terms, but both in terms of its finances and the impact it's having on the world. And what this means is that as companies grow, the sort of resource that they always bang up against is talent. Attracting the best talent, as was mentioned, is incredibly important. Companies that have impact baked into their profit models are going to be able to attract the top millennial talent. And in our view, companies that don't are gonna really struggle.
Yeah. Do you have anything on this?
Agreed. I mean, it's all a function of the options you have, right? So if you are a young graduate looking for employment opportunities, and you have company A that, as Seth described, has, you know, an impact and a mission beyond financials, and then you have company B that is solely focused on maximizing some sort of financial KPI, you know, I think the choice is relatively obvious, all else being equal, right? And I think that puts pressure on company B to say, look, it doesn't mean that we have to give up what we're doing today. It just means that, you know, we have to have a higher mission, you know, we have to have a company culture, and we actually, you know, we have to provide an alternative, right? And so it then becomes, I think, you know, a circle whereby more and more employers are forced essentially to think about more than financial performance, which is great.
And we're actually living in a really beautiful age where that sort of choice is now often there, right? So that person can choose between company making tons of profit and company making tons of profit and doing good.
Yeah.
And you know, there are typically 4 things that people want in a career, right? They want to make money, obviously. They want to work with people that inspire them and they like. They want to work on interesting problems, and they want to do good. This is pretty universal across cultures and across demographics. And historically, you had to choose 2, maybe 3 of those things. But we're now living in an age where you can have all 4. And so people don't have to make these sacrifices, which I think is going to put a lot of pressure on companies and is going to create this sort of virtuous cycle where business is heading towards the direction of solving these sort of systemic problems.
Do you think everybody should be doing it?
Definitely.
Why isn't everybody doing it? Are there some obstacles still or bottlenecks or?
I think cultural change takes a lot of time. This guy Milton Friedman is part of the problem. He was a Nobel Prize winning economist. And he published an article in the New York Times in 1970s called "The Social Responsibility of Business is to Increase Profits." And it created this myth of maximizing shareholder value as the thing that business was supposed to do. And if you wanted to take some of the money you made and do good with it, you could do that fine. But baby boomers largely bought into this, and so that sort of cultural change gets passed down. And I think the millennial generation, as they become the people who are starting the companies and as they become the people who are funding the companies, there's a $30 trillion wealth transfer happening right now between baby boomers and millennials, the largest this planet has ever seen. As those people are the ones that are the entrepreneurs and the investors, I think we're quickly going to see everyone start to work on this. And we're not going to be having a panel 10 years from now about impact investing or impact business. It's just going to be baked into all business. Yeah. I really believe that.
Yeah. You too?
I agree. I mean, I think going back technical to Milton, right, I think the definition of shareholder value is being redefined.
Yeah.
Right, so I think as a business, you still want to look back to your shareholders, but you quickly realize that the value you're creating is about more than just financials. And part of it is, it's sustainability, right? If you want the company to last for a long time, there's really more to that than just churning out sort of near-term profits, right?
And if you think about it till the end, if we don't have a planet that works, we don't have a company that works. So maybe, is it like our generation's thing to kind of want to have some kind of grand mission, wanting to save the world? Does this have something to do with it?
Maybe. I mean, we're facing some very urgent crises. And I think a lot of people in Europe and now in America are seeing that we can't necessarily rely on government to solve these problems always. And so I think a lot of people feel like they need to take it into their own hands. And business and capitalism can be in a tremendous way of solving problems. Capitalism is the greatest engine and accelerant that this species has ever seen. And if you point it in the good direction and throw some fuel into it, amazing things can happen.
I think fundamentally technology is also changing the way we consume media and the access of information we have. So I think today you grow up much more aware of what's going on in the world around you and prioritize sort of issues based on a global as opposed to local maximum, right? So not what my local newspaper is telling me is the biggest thing, but what the resources I can identify online rank, and you put things into perspective, right? And I think it's much easier to really realize the magnitude of some of the issues that are going out there and feel a more personal connection to it, right? And I think that's only going to increase.
So we're becoming more conscious with the internet, with the global media. We're becoming more conscious about what's happening in the world, and that means we have to act differently, and that drives business.
Yeah, I think we're becoming more conscious. That's a really great point. And also, I think people are becoming more aware of how empowered they are to solve some of these big problems, and how empowered they are to do it without making the sacrifices that you used to have to make. 50 years ago, if you wanted to do good and solve the climate crisis, you probably had to go work for an environmental NGO, which means you're sacrificing the ability to, build up a financial war chest to support your family. You might not be working with the sort of best and the brightest because there is a brain drain problem in the world of NGOs, and now you can work on that problem and make no sacrifices. And I think people are also becoming more aware of that.
There are some very kind of interesting risks in the areas you guys invest in. You probably too. Many of these are new fields, and we don't know exactly how they work. It has to do with health and the food we eat and things like that. AI. So what do you see as the main kind of risks you have to think about, and how do you manage those?
it's difficult. Everything has negative externalities. Even doing good has negative externalities. There's the famous example of Al Gore, who was spreading the message of global warming, was jetting around on private planes and hence contributing to it. And so you've got to try and factor all of that in, but it's incredibly difficult to do that. And so my partner Ella at the fund is actually super interested in sort of using AI to help model this out, to sort of figure out what the negative externalities of a synthetic biology company making sustainable chemicals is. But right now, I think we're not particularly good at it. And by we, I mean the species, not just us. I think we're probably slightly better at it than most, but I think it's just a really hard problem to model.
And it's kind of scary because the greater the impact, the more it can go wrong if it does.
Which is why we founder belief and founder sort of value system is so important to us. Because at the end of the day, the founders are the ones driving the company, the founders are the ones driving the technology. And so if you make sure that there's value alignment there, then you can sort of prevent a lot of the risks that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the founders is what I was thinking about. I mean, ultimately, I think where we take risk and where we love taking risk is on people that we back, right? And sort of it can go both ways in the same company, right? And so, for us, we were fortunate enough to partner with Jack Ma and Alibaba in 1999. And so that company has had a roller coaster ride that has turned out really well, but there were ups and downs. And so you have to be very comfortable with taking risk and ultimately believing in the people that you're backing, that they will figure it out.
What kind of means do you have to find out who the right people are? I mean, it's very hard to know in advance who will run a good company, and often the founder problems, they might end up breaking it. So how do you measure a good team? How do you define?
So, I mean, you look at where their passion for solving the problem comes from, what their history is, have they worked on important issues before, how much do their eyes light up when they talk about this, right? Like you can feel the passion, when you're talking to an entrepreneur. One of our companies is recombinantly making gelatin. So it's just this like gummy thing that's traditionally made from the remains of cows, and it's super nasty, and they're making it recombinantly. And gelatin is the unsexiest thing on the planet. But when they talk about gelatin and all the different use cases and all the different ways, their eyes light up and you go, wow, like if these people can be so excited about this, that's a good entrepreneur. And then, to borrow from George W. Bush's, George W. Bush said he looked into Putin's eyes and saw his soul. There's a little bit of that, right? A lot of it's just sort of intuiting as best you can their values.
I think it's a combination of excitement about the opportunity and assessment of the person's skills to actually seize that opportunity, right? And it's highly subjective. In some cases, you're helped by prior performance, which makes things a little bit easier. But ultimately, you're taking a bet, right? Like whether it's really early stage and still early stage within the grand scheme of things, things can go in multiple directions so many times that I think it comes back to saying, you got to be excited about something and take a bet on the founders.
Yeah. About taking bets, any particularly interesting ones you've taken that didn't go so well? I don't call them failures anymore. I just call them learning experiences. So
we're lucky in that our fund is 14 months old, so we haven't really taken any big lumps yet. Without a doubt, that will happen. When you're investing in companies that are as ambitious and founders that are ambitious as the founders we are, a lot of them will fail, right? Because they're trying to do really big, really hard things. And so, what you hope is that some of them succeed and bring sort of transformative change, but the fact of the matter is that a lot of them won't. So that certainly will happen, but we're lucky to have, avoided that yet. So we're still, bright-eyed and optimistic.
Good.
Yeah, we've definitely had some partnerships that did not go as expected, but none that proved us wrong about the founders. How about that?
It's a positive note to end on. Before we go, do you want to explain your hat?
Absolutely not.
He's ready for the party. I hope you all are too. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.